Navigator, Part 3, Ashes and Omens. I was awoken by the alarms from my ship's sensor package. I remember the crushing feeling as I realized the alcohol poisoning hadn't killed me. I wrenched my pounding head to the side where my pistol lay close at hand, but the desire to survive is hardwired. I crawled to the kitchen for water. When I came to again, the alarms were just as insistent. I dragged myself to my feet and staggered to the bridge of my sloop. The HUD was too bright, and I blinked eyes that felt filled with sand. It took me some time to make sense of the data. I didn't believe it at first, so I rolled back the records. The relay station hung in the void, surrounding the solitary jump point in this patch of void, the only link to the outside worlds if you and your grandchildren didn't want to die of old age at sublight speeds. For the second time I saw an incoming jump, albeit on my ship's screens. The bloom of obsidian threw up warnings across every sensor I had. Computers don't know how to deal with zero data, and several systems rebooted to clear error codes. The ones that stayed online informed me that matter had materialized. Materialized with 11 cubic centimeters of durasteel in three-dimensional space, currently occupied by relay station alloy. The resulting explosion was comparable to a torpedo strike. The delicate structures of the relay station shattered into mirror-like shards of rare metals. The Terran destroyer was shoved violently in the opposite direction, toward my world's surface at a delta V my species wouldn't survive. My sensors told me the destroyer attempted to correct course, thrusters firing to counteract the spin, but the drive engines were dead, not enough to pull it out of its fall toward the surface of my world. Atmospheric friction streaked fire across the sky. I seized my pistol and began to run. The destroyer had carved a ravine into the surface. The durasteel armor was slagged by energy cannons and ruptured by missile impacts. Honeycomb-like internals sealed to prevent decompression from the breaches in the hull. One of the gun houses had mass driver barrels bent like broken fingers, belching oily smoke. I heard the screech of metal on metal, a dead drive engine thrust vectoring, malfunctioning flight controls, like the death rattle of a dying animal. A Terran dropped from the nose of the craft, through an unsealed blast door, through the rent in the hull plating from energy cannon impact, melting the shoulder of his pressure suit against the superheated metal as he passed. He landed easily, exoskeleton absorbing the impact, rifle held low ready, helmet turning to scan the surrounding area. I could see a vehicle approaching, an open-topped, wheeled transport filled with Disretti mercs, the advance force, undoubtedly followed by more. I wondered what the bounty was on captured Terran. 2 more Terran dropped from the punctured hull, armored and armed as the first. The Disretti established a sight line, slowing their vehicle as they adjusted course between a boulder and a copse of vegetation, a squad in the back bristling with energy weapons. One stood, some kind of rocket-propelled grenade on his shoulder. And the destroyer awoke. 120,000 kilograms of turreted mass driver pitched downward, massive servo motors adjusting to their firing solutions. A flash whited out my vision. Half a moment later, the sound and shockwave punched into my chest. The Disretti and their vehicle effectively vaporized. Isn't there some saying about dying animals being the most dangerous? I watched for another moment, then blinked as I decided. Purposeless no more. I stepped into the open, pulling the energy cell from my pistol. They clacked together as they hit the grass. Next was my shirt. I felt the wind blow heat from the destroyer onto my skin. A chain gun perked up in its cradle as I stepped again. I heard the whine as the servos twitched the gun onto my position, but I kept my gaze on the Terran shock trooper, the one in the exo, with the broken horns of a shriek warrior stamped on its chest in red. I turned in a complete circle, outstretching my arms, universal symbol for, I'm not carrying a weapon. I could see the Disretti advancing, in the distance. Converted cattle carriers packed with mercs and outmoded tanks waiting for the range of their energy cannons. Some sort of surface-to-surface anti-armor weapon arced toward the Terran ship. The destroyer answered with CIWS that threw ribbons of tracers into the sky, streams the dull red of durasteel impacted by energy cannons. I opened my mouth, shrike words spat between my teeth. We must free the slaves or be ourselves subdued. The Terran brought his rifle up. He answered in the growling, guttural language of the shriek, amplified by his helmet's speakers. Get on the ground! Get on the ground now! I knelt. Get down or you will be fired upon. Arms outstretched! I fell forward, feeling the grass against my chest. cool after the heat of the destroyer and the star's daylight. Another burst of CIWS tore through the atmo, followed by the thudding of a chain gun. I suppressed the twisted pleasure as I heard Desretti's screams, faint in the distance. "Stay down." "Who are you?" The Terran shock trooper was almost to me, followed by two more like him, combat-worn ballistic armor, plasma burns in sharp relief against the matte of the paint. One had the faded remains of a skull stenciled on its helmet in white. I'd seen plenty of powered exoskeletons before, but these were somehow different. These were brutal. Bare machine without polymer guards to smooth the jagged edges or rounded streamlining on the rugged structure. These didn't pretend to have been built for anything but combat, stripped down to nothing but cold alloy. I wondered if I had made the wrong choice, as I turned my head to stare into the acrid-smelling barrel of the kinetic rifle, and as the second soldier felt along my legs for weapons, I found that I didn't care. "Who are you?" Another tearing sound as CIWS tracers sliced across the sky. Then, the thunderbolt of a mass driver, the force of the gun sending dirt and grass into the air on the shock wave. I blinked debris out of my eyes. My gaze seemed to be locked onto the broken horns of a shriek warrior, stamped onto the Terran's chest in faded red. "You destroyed the Shrike?" "Who are you?" The voice was loud, stripped of inflection through low-quality speakers. One of the Terran knelt, his knee pinning me to the ground. "An ally," I hissed. I felt his hand against my shoulder blade. A pause. A long pause, broken by another brrrr of CIUs. A Terran boot shoved me onto my back. Two kinetics aimed at my chest. The third soldier swept his rifle in wide arcs. Overwatch. "How did you get Neurolink?" the Terran shouted, voice deadened by the helmet's speaker system. "When I was a slave of the Shriek before your kind killed them?" I screamed back, my voice sounding small and high in contrast to the armored creature above me. "And I have been the slave of those you now fight. I am not your enemy." The world went quiet as I waited, fraction of an instant that felt like a year. "I'm not your enemy." A heartbeat. A stream of red tracers across the sky. Another heartbeat. And I found that I did care. I cared so much that the realization made me gasp, dragging in a lungful of dust and heat and the acrid smell of kinetics. I closed my eyes. Please don't leave me stranded without a relay. A decision was made. The Terran seized my arm and hauled me to my feet, his exo's augmented strength dragging me several meters before I found my footing. The three escorted me at a running half-crouch, one before and one behind. There were a half-dozen armored Terrans spread across the earthen cover formed when the destroyer slammed into the ground. They watched me, the face masks of their helmets almost translucent in the daylight. The Terran pulled me close, then lifted me toward the breached hull of the destroyer. I slapped my fingers onto the edge, pulling myself upward with the effortless assistance of the shock trooper. He jumped and hauled himself up behind me, the exoskeleton making the motion as natural as walking. The blast doors opened, and for a single moment I thought I had stepped into hell. The atmo was choked with noise and heat, humid and thick, the scent of sweat and fear and anger. Klaxons blared, keening a steady intonation. Combat lighting that turned my skin sickly, dashed by yellow hazard lights. Shrieks and wails echoed from the durasteel depths of the dying monster. Curses and screams, orders and acknowledgement. The reverberating roar of CIWs, amplified in the enclosed passages between decks. The boom of a mass driver dimming the illumination paneling physically felt like a sucker punch to my ribs. A hollow, resounding clang, as if the sky had fallen when the CIWS network was overwhelmed and a missile impacted the hull plating. I was dragged through the internals of the dying beast, through the nightmare of metal and flesh, shoved past half-seen Terran crewmen that stared with eyes that burned through me, like targeting lasers painting an enemy hull, until we made it to the destroyer's belly, where the roar of combat was transformed to white readouts on display screens and crimson warnings pulsing on HUDs. The Terran who stood across from me was unarmored. His pressure suit was colorless in the combat lighting, script across his chest and on his shoulder his only marking. He made a loud click somehow with his fingers, and a motion I didn't understand. In response, a rough blanket was thrown over my shoulders. I stared at him. Because armorless, he looked like me, like the very. 2 arms, 2 legs, hair, ears, sharp nose. Only the eyes were different. Strange ringed things that seemed to burn with internal light. but not identical. The brow was heavier, jaw thicker, shoulders and torso encased in muscle. Compact, durable. I could tell by his movements he was stronger and quicker. Like me, but evolved on a death world. Very, if we were predators instead of prey. A creature almost a combat species. Fully such a species only when joined with their tech and the singular drive of their psyche. He spoke shriek well, with an accent better than mine, vocal structures suited to the tongue. They tell me you were implanted while you were a slave to the shriek. Yes. You escaped? Your kind killed them. We killed a lot of Shrike. His gaze was unwavering through his burning eyes. You don't fight for the UCN. They never fought for me. He said nothing, just bored his burning gaze into me, as the white and blue and green display readouts and projected HUDs were slowly, relentlessly, submerged in a sea of malfunction red. A mass driver's boom dimmed the lighting. An instant later, CIWS intensified, another half instant, and something impacted the hull above me. The destroyer rocked, sending me reeling. The Terran only swayed, anchored by mag boots to the Durasteel deck. Several HUDs refreshed crimson as a high tone wailed, drawing frantic speech in a tongue I didn't know. A Terran female, strapped into a flight chair, let a long, agonized moan drain through her clenched jaw. Amid the distant reverberation of CIWs and chain cannons, she came awake, thrashing erratically. Because detach is excruciating without the proper separation procedures. This is Shrike Tech? I asked slowly, unsure at first. Flickering my eyes across the displays, across the flight chairs and Terran crewmen. Pilots and gunners plugged into computers. You stole this from the Shrike. Spoils of war. He spoke carefully, still considering me. I echoed the words I had spoken so long ago, the ones that had saved me from the mines. I'm a pilot. Can you read stellar coordinates? Yes. I felt some long-forgotten emotion rising within me. Void take me, I thought. This species will conquer the stars. I spun back toward him as another impact shook the destroyer's hull. Jump! I almost yelled. I stepped toward him. The Terran shock troopers behind me lunged forward, stopped when I halted. I held up my arm. The tattoo was faded now, after such a time, but still easily visible on my pale skin. He stood impassive before me. This is all the Corps has given me! No species in the stars came for me but you. Jump away and let me fight against the ones who wronged me. Or if I can't fight... He made his decision, unfastening the top of his uniform to strip it back to only a thin shirt. The muscles in his forearms stood out in relief under the combat lighting. Energy weapon scarring curled down his upper arm and around his elbow. But on the inside of his forearm, faded, barely legible anymore, was a tattoo. 11 numbers in Shriek script. I remember shock like plunging into glacial water. What did they want from your kind? His fist clenched, relaxed. He fastened the uniform quickly, expertly after long practice. They wanted what we could not give. The guns were silent now, I realized. Now, girl, he continued, his speech hard but not unkind. I really hope you weren't lying. I stared a question at this Terran, one of a kind that had risen against their masters and hunted them to extinction among the stars. Because I'm down 2 pilots, he guided me toward a flight chair. There was a Terran in it. He undid the harness and dragged the female onto the deck. Her body was limp, eyes dull and sightless. Because this used to be my Navigator, and because my destroyer has 1 jump left in her capacitors. He gestured toward the chair. And because in 4 minutes those creatures out there are going to cut through my hull. I placed 1 palm on the chair. It was cushioned, cold. Are you sure? He asked. No creature within the settled galaxies may not choose a side in this war. Why would I not fight with the freed? I whispered. His voice was sardonic, mirthless humor. Because we're losing. I lowered myself into the Navigator's flight chair. That's fine, I thought. I've been losing my whole life. Have you ever seen a jump? I don't mean passing through a relay station along a hyperlane. Most can't quote the exact physics, but pre-existing jump points are an established fact among the stars. Discovered, not constructed. Networked with other jump points and shielded by constructed relay stations to ensure the FTL journey is both unquestionably safe and perfectly accurate. No, I mean a jump. The single greatest technological advancement within the settled galaxies. Dematerializing at one point in existence and materializing at another. the pinnacle of Terran technological and scientific advancement, reshaping reality itself, inconsiderate of the physical laws of both space and time. A wormhole anywhere to anywhere, the closest thing to omnipresence our 3 dimensions will ever know. They can call the old way anything else for all I care. Terran are the only species that can jump. Have you ever seen it? No, I can tell you haven't. You've only seen it with your eyes, through fleshly organs, frail and delicate as any other structure in your body. You've seen only that which is perceivable to your 3 dimensions. The obsidian rent and purple tendrils of a 3-dimensional being struggling to make sense of the higher planes. You haven't seen it through more than your eyes. You haven't seen it through 90 million worth of Neuralink input and output cyberware. You haven't seen it through radar and LiDAR, through sensor packages designed to function where radar and LiDAR can't, to interface with biological matter so pilots and gunners can see hostile battleships while the jump drives are still downshifting through layer after layer of hyperspace. You've never looked with corporeal eyes out of synthoglass portholes during the passage through hyperspace. I reclined in the navigator's chair, restrained against violent maneuvering, shivering against the slowly warming cushion. While the Disretti Consortium mercs cut through the armored hull, I wondered what the bounty was on live Terran. The other Terran in the room had protested when their leader led me toward the chair, surged forward with oaths and protests, clutching fingers seeking to drag me back, away from their dead female that had once been a navigator. But their leader had barked in the Terran tongue, barked like a predator warning prey back from a claimed kill, and they halted, shrank back, mutterings and murmurs quelled with a stare through his strange, ringed, burning eyes. And he turned to me again, his back toward those who followed his orders even when unwilling, and he spoke stellar coordinates in the Shrike tongue. I looked at him for a long moment, closed my eyes as I thought, shivered once from stress and fear. It wasn't right. Didn't make sense. He wasn't telling me something. Do you trust me? I asked him. Can I? No, I answered simply. Except that you told me this warship has only 1 jump remaining in her. And if we jump where you tell me to, we will spend the rest of this war and our lives frozen in the void on the outer rim. He was thinking again, considering, methodically calculating his way through data, his gaze unwavering through his burning eyes. I pushed him again. Your kind was awoken from near the Shriek homeworlds. Those coordinates aren't to your homeworlds, and the first strikes by the United Galaxies erased your outposts. You're just going to wait for a rescue. He nodded just once. Homeworld, he corrected. Just one. And gave me another set of coordinates. Then he drew a kinetic pistol from its holster and pressed the cold barrel into my temple. I think I may have just committed treason. Mirthless humor again. Don't. He didn't complete the thought. I lay back and he linked the destroyer interface with my nervothread. The synthetic filaments woven into the nerves through my spinal column ignited into flame, burned like the first day they were implanted, pain like wildfire across my fingertips, forcing my jaws open in a soundless scream. I'd been slaved to O9 ore mules, confined before to Shriek shuttles. I'd piloted cartel gunships off the orbit of Illurion, but now for the first time I was linked with her. A Terran dreadnought, what they call a destroyer, the pinnacle of the Terran war machine and the personification of the vengeance for their enslavement before the first contact war, an apex predator of the void. I'd thought her dead, a shell, nothing but a husk of durasteel and sapped ion shielding, but I realize now, even through link-ups barely compatible with the Terran tech, adapted from stolen Shrike architecture, I realized she was a slumbering behemoth, a wounded colossus, the sum of a physics equation that equaled 50 million kilograms of potential energy. And I told her where I needed her to be. She did not submit willingly. She fought, an almost incomprehensible force against my lone, fragile garden world form. Tens of millions of kilograms of durasteel hull, CIW's cradles, chain gun emplacements, torpedo batteries, missile tubes, and mass driver gun houses struggled against my will. Ion shielding flared into the visible spectrum, ripples of blue across the hull plating. Keening sirens intoned their frantic cries. Nuclear reactors buried in her belly surged power into the integrated systems of the ship. Her wounds seethed warnings across HUDs and displays. Automated defense systems challenged my decision, insisting their programming could defend indefinitely, requiring only that the gun crews supply more ordnance for their deadly task. I wrestled with her, organic flesh against synthetic construction. A single creature opposed to the culmination of an entire species' militaristic capabilities. And I told her where I needed her to be. Damaged drive engines struggled to reignite. Ruptured fuel cells burned. Gravity warped under me as the jump drive spooled up. And I told her where I needed her to be. Emergency klaxons blared their warnings. She groaned and wailed with the strain of her systems of biological matter and manufactured alloys. She fought, seeking to drive me from herself, to purge me from her processors, to defend herself from that which attempted to overwhelm her self-defense subroutines, to shield herself from this unknown that threatened her children, her crew, her creators. And I asked her, as a friend, to be at the coordinates her captain had given me. And she went with a sigh, like the last thoughts of a suicidal plunge from a skyscraper. And we were not.